Welcome to the Awakened Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Get ready to create magic and miracles as you lean into your heart's desires. I believe not only does the heart want what it wants, but it knows. This show is a weekly deep dive into what it means to live from an awakened heart. I'll be sharing inspiring stories and real conversations with people just like you, who have turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. My mission is to show you how you too can be connected and heart-centered in every area of your life. Your journey to aligning with more love, more joy, and your wildest dreams come true starts now. Welcome, my friends, to the Awakened Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. And today's episode, we're going to give homage to the mothers. Mother's Day isn't too far off, and remembering your mom, whether she's with us still, if you're so blessed and lucky to still have your mom in your life, or if she is passed to the other side and you still have all these loving memories of her. Maybe she's not physically here anymore, but she still is here in spirit. Today's guest, Caroline Nadine Helsing, weaves together a beautiful memoir of her mother, an homage to her in Unapologetic Tales of the Original Party Crasher, which was just released earlier this month. Unapologetic is a heartfelt story of a daughter processing the loss of her mother. And, I began reading it myself. It's very funny. It's very touching. It just draws you in. It's a memoir-biography, and it follows her mother through a life from crashing parties and hobnobbing with celebrities in New York City. I mean, the likes of like Steve McQueen and Charlie Chaplin, Ava Gardner, like the big bigs, like legendary celebrities. And it follows her from New York City to Hawaii, where Caroline was born and raised, and back full circle to the city that she loved, including all of the characters she met in between and the lessons she taught her daughter along the way. The book is a portrait of a life lived truly and unapologetically. And it's such a beautiful story, and it's such a beautiful, celebration of a life and the impact that she has to this day, and, the memories that will always be with her. Caroline herself, you could say, is living her own life unapologetically, just like her mother. Now, I have to say, I've always been impressed with Caroline throughout the years. Like, this girl, she's got an entrepreneurial spirit. And if there's something she wants to go for, she gets it. And one of the things she did after moving away from Los Angeles is she went down to Orange County, Newport Beach area and founded her own manufacturing company, which she has since sold. Some of the other things I've seen her doing is traveling the globe through her humanitarian and mission work, which took her to remote areas of Mexico, Peru, and deep into the Amazon jungle. She has also been a photographer, and she has been a freelance writer and has received nominations and awards for her volunteer and writing endeavors. And now the recent writing endeavor has led her to being a published author. And Unapologetic is a must-read. It's so heartwarming, it's so lovely, it's beautiful. And without further ado, here is its author, Caroline Nadine Helsing. Here we go. Now we're recording. Here we are. Welcome to the Awakened Heart Podcast, Caroline.
Thanks. It's so nice to be here, Nancy.
Yes, thank you. All the way from Orange County. Now, I have to say, because, this is real life. So, Carol and I started this, we thought we were recording, but we got into like 5 minutes of it, and I realized, oh crap, I wasn't recording. So
I'm
that
glad we were only 5 minutes in.
So this is take 2. So it just happens. So I was saying, when I realized I wasn't recording, Caroline and I met over 20 years ago through a mutual friend, Doria. Her name's Doria.
We were both about five or
yeah,
6.
We were 5. Yeah. Preschool, kindergarten, that kind of thing. We used to do background work. Moira McKay was on the show a couple months ago. She was one as well. And we used to do commercials, and we were part of this group called Extra Extra Casting Company. And we would work all the time together, like every kind of commercial imaginable. And we'd spend hours and hours in sets. And we really grew deep and lasting friendships for it because we spent so much time on
You're
set
like
together.
family. It was like family.
It was so much fun. And in Caroline, I've watched her through the years develop into this amazing woman. Like it's so cool seeing people that you've known, that you've spent so much time with in the entertainment industry, kind of branching off and doing their own thing, kind of getting out of that entertainment business and into something else. And so I've watched her as she created her own business around animals. And then she's had so many travels and accolades. And I really admire that because I've got like a traveling heart myself. And to see her go all over the world and do her
I was doing a lot of volunteer work.
work. So I saw a lot of that. And she's located down in Orange County right now and near Laguna, which is a beautiful, beautiful area. It's a total escape from LA. So I used to go down there and enjoy it. So she's a little bit outside of that. So Caroline, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background? And I know you wrote this amazing book that's an ode to your mother. But before you got there, tell me a little bit about where you're from and some of the things that you did before and what led you to creating this book.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I moved to Los Angeles 2 days before my 23rd birthday to continue. I had started acting and commercial work and so forth in the islands. And I wanted to try the experience up in California. And so I moved to LA, and that's soon after I think I met you. We started doing a lot of commercial work, and I lived there, God, maybe for about 8.5 years, give or take. I can't remember. But before I left, do you remember my dog, Bentley?
Yes.
Lost the Opso dog. Okay. So he used to jump up onto the bed and couch and whatnot, and he would sleep with me. And I had gotten a new mattress, a new bed that was higher than my old one. And so he suddenly couldn't get up anymore. He'd try and jump up and fall down, poor guy. So I had made a little dog step for him to get up onto the bed. That led to basically a company. People had found out and they said, oh my God, I'm using a bookcase and a this and a that. I'm like, so I started manufacturing it. And then I quickly added t-shirts with slogans like, bitches love me and security. And that grew into we had over 250 sayings with matching people t-shirts and baby clothes and collars and beds. And I had that for over about 10.5 years. It's what brought me down to Orange County. And I sold that, God, I think it was in 2013. And then I just kind of wanted to take a breather. You know, I got back into an old love of mine, which is photography. I just love creating. And then I started doing a lot of volunteer work. I joined the Rotary down here, and through these medical missions that I became involved with, we traveled to Mexico and Peru and deep into the Amazon. And it was so exciting. And it was so fulfilling to do this volunteer work. So I kind of miss it, definitely with COVID, but I would do a lot of, photography and document and so forth. And then to kind of fast forward to where I'm at now, I have always loved writing. In fact, when I was a kid, I would, I have like journals and journals and journals of just God knows what in my head. And, in the back of my mind, I always kind of wanted to write a story about my mother because I know you just started reading a little bit about her. She was unlike anyone I had ever known, especially growing up as a child. She was not like the other mothers. She didn't, she wasn't part of the PTA or any of that. Like she was just very, very like glamorous and kind of made her own fantasy world and lived in that. But she was fabulous. She was fantastic. And I think I appreciate it more now as an adult, looking back and loving the fact that she was so different. And she had this love affair with New York City. And that was very apparent. We were very close, and she unfortunately passed away. couple years now, and it was on New Year's Day. And I always say, you know, she was waiting for, she always loved a good party. So of course she waited until New Year's, but it was bittersweet because my life was starting to kind of take shape, you know, in a different way. I'd just gotten engaged, and then, you know, she had fallen. And so that's kind of what set her on that trajectory. She just couldn't recover, but she made it to our wedding. That was very special. I have these memories that I will always have of her managing to get out of, you know, her wheelchair, because she couldn't really walk very well, and just dance. And I have this video of her, and I'm so glad a couple of friends had like managed to catch it, of her dancing to, of all things, all the single ladies. I mean, she didn't care what she was dancing to. She just loved moving. And that was sort of a theme for her and her life. She used to be a professional dancer, and kind of throughout the book, she's just always loved to dance. So sort of bittersweet that she sort of lost that, you know, strength. But after she passed, I think it was back, let's see, it was almost a year later, maybe in November, is when I started to begin writing her story. I was just called to just do it already. The hardest step is always the first step. You know, I thought, gosh, will I have enough stories to tell? Like, who even wants to read about it? They don't know, you know? And I thought, I don't even care. This is for me. It was a therapeutic experience. It was definitely a labor of love. And I thought, if something happens, fantastic. If not, I have this document and memory of her. And it just kept going and going and going. And I didn't realize it would be almost 400 pages long. You know, it was something that enabled her to still be with me in a way. So it almost feels like she's never left, because she's always been in my mind, especially from writing and, you know, thinking about her. And I know this is a long answer to your question. But you know, it was cool because it enabled me to talk to people that I had normally never talked to, you know, like her, like I had these amazing conversations with her best friend, Marilyn, that was probably one of my favorite chapters to write, of her youth and learning things that I would never have known about, you know, and then talking with my father, who's very private and, you know, just from a different era. Like, he didn't share a lot of emotion, and I just got to know the father behind, you know, like my dad behind the dad kind of thing. And that was really cool. And just discovering what their first song was and what she was wearing when they first met. Like, it's crazy that he knew and remembered in detail, like this pink knit dress. And
wow.
Anyway, so
she was that fabulous. He just remembers that. Yeah, I was really drawn in by this book, and you write so well, and your love for your mother really comes across, and you just paint such a beautiful picture of her and her life. And I can't wait to dive into it more. But there was something that you had said in the book, that you said, I was finding myself unpacking her life by the very act of packing up her life. So when you went back to your house to start putting away your mother's stuff, your father had tasked you with doing that because he couldn't bear to do it himself. Yeah. Was it then that inspired you to start writing it, when you started like putting her things and discovering things? I remember what you talked about, the gratitude jar, where you thought it was just little pieces of paper in there. And luckily you opened it, and you had mentioned to her, you know, when she was feeling down, just throw something that you're grateful for into a little jar. And through that process, is that what had you opening up to writing this story and getting her story out?
It was already in my mind, but it was like, as I was writing it, I was learning more and more. And up until that point, they were all just stories in my head, you know, stories that I had been told, memories, you know, accounts from other people. And when I started to pack up her things, you know, I actually came across the programs that she kept for so many decades, of these, you know, movie premieres that she would crash with her friend Ron Galella, who that was another story. I mean, he I discovered was they say the original paparazzi for the most part. You know, he would follow Jackie O at the time. He made that picture of her, the black and white, you know, the one where she's walking across the street and her hair is kind of blowing in her face. He took that Anyway, so he was just kind of starting out. They were friends, and he would tell her about these parties, and they kind of helped each other get in.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
She'd hide his camera under the table, and she'd just take a seat next to Frank Sinatra or whatever. And what was great about her is she had no trepidation. She just walked in like she owned the place. And so that's something. She always had this immense amount of confidence in herself, and I always admired that.
So how did she do that? Because as I was reading, I was so astounded. I didn't know like all the seating charts of all these greats. So they had seating charts. How did they know that she wasn't supposed to be at the table, or how did that work?
No idea. I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know if she didn't sit there I don't know. She just floated around the place talking to people, but she looked amazing apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And so much too that I came across an article that had been written about her in the New York Post by a columnist who would, write about like celebrity sightings and whatnot. And they gave her a nickname. They called her Harlow after Jean Harlow, because she, she always admired the movie stars of the era, the platinum blondes, all that, and she would dye her hair. In fact, I've never seen her anything other than a blonde, but I'm brunette. My father's brunette, so I'm pretty sure she's, but she would just like tear out these photos from magazines and give it to her seamstress to like recreate these outfits that she had seen on the movie stars. And she just, she loved fashion. And so she'd just walk in, and they wrote about her. And in fact, the funny thing is, for the longest time, I actually was planning to call the book Harlow after this nickname of hers. And there's a scene in LA. So Nancy, I wrote a little bit about my years in LA when my mother came to visit me. And one of my roommates, I had described, I call them temperature wars, because my mother was perpetually always cold. So she'd always, turn up the heat in the middle of the night. And then I'd hear my roommate come out of her room and turn it down. And it would be like back and forth. It was comedy. But anyway, so I had talked with my friend, and I'd mentioned, I was about ready to finish this book and let her know, I'd written about her. And, we just kind of reminisced about my mother. And I'd mentioned something about how the fact that she just always lived unapologetically herself. Mm-hmm. And she stopped me and she said, that's what you have to call it. You have to call it unapologetic. And I was like, I don't know. I already have a name. It's going to be called Harlow. But the more I thought about it, I thought, man, it's kind of, I don't know. It had a little bit of an intrigue to it. So thanks to my friend, I changed it.
Oh, it does. It's just got its own essence to it. She's unapologetically herself. She's unapologetic. And yeah, and some of the greats that she like hobnobbed with, like Steve McQueen, Warren Beatty, Paul Newman. I mean, these are legends in the day. And in part of your book, when she was with your father, before he was your father, she took his hand and led him into the party. And he was just astounded by, who was it? Ava Gardner? I don't remember who it was. Ava
Gardner and Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine?
And that's so not his world. And that's another thing that I wrote a lot about in the book, is that my parents were two complete, absolute opposites. In every possible way. My mom was from the big city of New York. My dad's from this small town in Indiana. My mother grew up dancing and loving all that. And my father's child was more like Footloose. Like, you're just different, different religions, just very different. But somehow for over 50 years, they worked. Mm-hmm. And there was just a lot of kind of accounts that I remember throughout my life of just seeing, my dad my mother would love to dance, for example. And the way she got my father up was just basically getting up from the table and standing in front of him and just kind of dancing. And he'd be so embarrassed. He'd have to get up and do that. But I remember them dancing in the middle of the living room, and it was just so sweet. They were really very much in love.
They're
and
soulmates.
So different.
Soulmates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so sweet. So, yeah, my dad wrote memoirs himself, and it was so interesting seeing him. He's such the professor, and so intellectual that he wrote a whole chapter on my mother and his heartbreaks and his losses, and
Mm.
how she's his soulmate. And to this day, he's like, "Yep, she's my soulmate," and they've been together since what 1958 they got married. And
Wow.
it's so inspiring. It's so inspiring to hear about your parents and how he can still describe, my dad can still describe the moment he met my mother as well. And your father can describe your mother and what she was wearing. So that's true love. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's beautiful. So what were some of your favorite chapters to write? What really stuck with you?
Well, as I mentioned, I loved writing. I think it was chapter 3, Double Trouble, was the chapter of my mother and her best friend Marilyn, and how they met, and all the trouble they got into, and their time in the Catskills, which is this mountain area in New York State. Yeah. And then also, actually one of the first chapters that I had, if not the first chapter I wrote, was towards the end. And it was about my journey with my mother afterwards, because at her bedside, I'm like, probably start crying now, but I had promised her that I would take her back to all of her favorite places in New York.
Mhm.
And, my mother never had an after death plan. I had no idea exactly what she wanted. She wanted to be cremated, or if she whatever, and I had to go by conversations that I had with her, or things that she had said. So I remember her saying once, she had loved Bergdorf Goodman, the department store in New York. And she's like, when I die, I want my ashes spread across Bergdorf Goodman. And I was like,
Oh my goodness.
God, was she kidding? I have no idea. But anyway, so that inspired me to, just bring her ashes back. And I had this sojourn, if you will, with her. And it was so cool, because I basically took her back to all of her favorite places, all of the places that she had told me about when I was a child. And I kind of saw it through her eyes. I saw why she loved New York so much, especially in that era. Yeah, that was really fun to write.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I want to be spreading bird off.
That gives you an
Department store.
idea.
Whoops. Oh, that's beautiful. Now, did you do that solo? Did you have anyone come with you? Did you?
I flew there. So my husband had business in New York already set up, actually. And when she passed, it kind of the timing worked out. He was already going to be there. And so I flew up, and he met me. He was down in another part, the East Coast. And then he came up and met me. But my first night there, I spent it with my best friend, and she and I reminisced. It's so funny. I remember this so well. I met her in this crowded restaurant, and I'm sitting there. I got there first, and I took out this framed photo of my mother and I set it on the table. And then I take out one of those battery operated lights, you just flick it on from the bottom. And I set that on the table, and I'm like, oh my God, I look like a lunatic, I'm sure. Sitting here with the framed photo and the little light, and then somebody comes over and asks for my order, and he doesn't even think twice. I'm like, okay, great. This is fantastic. I'm sure they've seen it all in New York. This is nothing. So that was sort of a theme for me throughout my stay there. I would kind of like take her out and have her with me.
Oh
So,
my God.
but my husband, yeah, he came up later, and that's the next that I think later that evening. And then he came with me, and we went all over. We went to Central Park and the Plaza Hotel, and yeah, we went to there was Bellaman's Bar, which is at Pierre. Oh my God, one of the hotels in New York City, and it's where she used to go all the time and listen to the piano player. And I remember, getting up and asking him to play a song that to me reminded me so much of my mother, which is, was always usually a Frank Sinatra song or something like that. And it was just bittersweet, but yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought Frank Sinatra, or one of those greats.
Yeah.
What is, you have these amazing memories of her, and she lived life to the fullest. What are some of the biggest lessons that you got from her? What do you see in yourself that is your mother?
Oh my gosh. Well, I see it almost every day and I'm like, oh my God, my mother would have said that, or I just said something my mother would say. The things that she taught me, I always said were subtle and unwittingly kind of by example, to experience everything you can in life, to love, to follow your passions, to say please and thank you, and to have confidence in yourself. So to be your own person. I mean, she, one thing I'm so grateful for is she allowed me to explore my interests and my passions. And she never said, no, honey, I think you should do this, or no, you shouldn't do that, or this is what you should do. She was always very supportive. And in fact, both my parents were. So I'm extremely grateful for that. And it's probably why, I don't know, I kind of like to reinvent myself. So, I've been everything from an actress to a manufacturer, business owner, author. And she, in a way, I felt the freedom to do that because she always stressed just experience and exploring and just finding what makes you happy. I mean, that was sort of what ran her life. She was always about following her bliss.
She gave you the freedom to be you, just like she's unapologetic. You're living your life unapologetically. And now I know, though they might be gone, they're still with us. And there's a quote that you had in your book by Emily Dickinson that I love. And I'm just going to read it real quick. And if I go while you're still here, know that I live on, vibrating to a different measure behind a thin veil you cannot see through. You will not see me, so you must have faith. I wait for the time when we can soar together again, both aware of each other. Until then, live your life to the fullest. And when you need me, just whisper my name in your heart. I will be there. Oh my God, that makes me laugh. So in what ways, they're gone, they're gone from our physical reality, but they're still always with us in memory, in spirit. So what ways have you seen her? What signs have you seen that she's still around you and she's always with you?
Man, there's so many. I remember a couple months after she passed, so her birthday is March 1st, and I had made a decision. I wanted to celebrate her, even though she wasn't here, and I would always celebrate her birthday. And so that year, I had gathered a few close friends, and we went up to this restaurant in LA, who you might remember. Have you heard of the restaurant called Vibrato? It's fantastic. Okay. And my mother and I loved it there. And so it's this place where you can hear like all jazz and you can eat, and there's always like a celebrity set, I don't know. She just loved it there. And so we went up there.
Is that at the top, like up Mulholland? And it's fabulous.
Yeah. And so we went there, and how you create one of those group texts where the logistics are and see you all there kind of thing. So, we had our evening, and we laughed and reminisced and took photos. And my camera, and rather not my camera, my phone that had never been out of my sight, was always with me. I had noticed when I got back to the car after that evening, I looked down and I saw in the group text, it said, LOL, Mom.
Oh my gosh.
And wow. I couldn't believe it. So there are things like that. Or, I'm sitting there in this is my she shed, our little upstairs bedroom. So that's where I wrote everything. But I'm sitting there just missing her and, wanting a sign and asking for a sign. And then suddenly I remembered one day, that happened. And all of a sudden my computer was on, but my iTunes came on, and the song, oh my goodness, the one with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dancing cheek to cheek, the heaven, I'm in heaven, da da da. I'm like, Mom, are you okay? I'm like, just tell me, you're okay. It's kind of what I was thinking. And this song came on.
Wow.
It doesn't, there's some, my father remembers hearing her voice, and he's not somebody that, I mean, I actually wrote about it in the end, and, he was so cute. He's like, honey, I have something to tell you. And I don't want you to think I'm crazy. And I don't know if I should tell you, that kind of thing. And I'm like, Dad, no, tell me, what is it? And he's like, oh, I heard okay, I'll just tell you, mother, and my brother had also an experience, and I don't know, and then you hear about, and I used to always go, oh, I want to be one of those people that looks down at their phone or looks at their clock and sees 11:11, and I never did until the day of her celebration of life. And I happened to look down and I saw it. And then ever since, I just keep seeing those angel numbers and butterflies and, I actually have a very funny story. There was one evening where it was just me at the house. My husband had just left to go to the East Coast, and I was scheduled to fly out the next day. And so it was just me. I was alone, and just kind of alone with my thoughts and my feelings. And, days had come by, I had people coming over to the house, giving me hugs and, sending flowers and all of that. And there's that hustle and bustle that happens after someone passes. There's the planning for their funeral, their celebration of life. There's all of that. And then when it stops, you're just with yourself in your memories. And I remember walking into the kitchen. I'm going to start crying again. I remember walking into the kitchen, and, I'm looking at everything that's surrounding me, all the flowers and the cards. And I see her, what is it? That's the little sign-in book that I had for people to write memories and whatnot. And I'd realized I had never read it yet. I didn't have a chance to. And I started reading through how she touched everybody. And then at the very end, I read something that my brother had written, and I was just shocked because, as you will find, my brother, to know him is to love him. I always say he's very special and sweet. And, he had written something that just really touched me anyway. So, cut to, I go into one of those ugly cries and drop to the floor, and I'm like, I miss you. Suddenly I hear this buzzing coming from upstairs. I'm like, what? I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm in one of those like horror films. I'm going upstairs. You never go upstairs. Why do they always go upstairs? You just go to the house. And I'm going upstairs. And then, I go in, and I see there's my little electric toothbrush that's on the counter suddenly on. And, it's dancing around on the countertop. And I just laughed. I thought, maybe, is this you, Mom? Are you trying to like get me out of just shake me out of this feeling and just let me know that you're here?
Wow. So. She's got a strong energy and spirit. I mean, those are distinct signs, like, cause that's what spirits, they work through electronic, their computer or like electronically, like, yeah. And you were like, waiting to see 11:11. I see 11:11 and 1:11 all the time, but she's sending you distinct signals. Like, wow, like that's amazing. And she must feel so much like connected. It's also like an awesome experience because it's just showing that life doesn't end.
Yeah.
When you don't see them physically here anymore, they're still there. And she really comes back and shows you. So I love your story about your mother, and we got Mother's Day coming up, and every moment that we have with our mothers is such a blessing. I'd love to hear what's next for you. What's lighting you up? Where would you like to go with this? I can see this being a movie. I think this is fabulous. Are you in talks with anyone?
I have been told this by a few people, so I'm just open to whatever happens. I'm currently putting this into a large print format. I've been asked to do an Audible, so I want to explore that journey. I think that would be fun. I will never say no to the idea of it turning into a film. I mean, I think she would be the most fun character for someone to play.
Such a fabulous character. Do you have any actresses in mind when you think about that?
Well, it's funny because on the back in the book jacket, I'm like, there was no one exactly like her, but she was sort of a cross between Holly Golightly, the, marvelous Miss Maisel type feel, the Moira from Schitt's Creek.
Yes, I saw them. Like,
I mean, that was her. I mean, the way she dressed, I mean, you'd be like, especially in Hawaii, in like on this island, she was always in jewels, like, costumes. It's not like she had a lot of money, but she just wanted to be fabulous.
Mm-hmm. And in fabulous too, where it's all flip-flops and shorts.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, that translates to, when I was born, she's like, a doll, the first thing she says. And then, I remember the doctor had to tell her, you live in Hawaii, for God's sake, stop with the the stockings and the bonnet and the this. And I was so hot as a little baby. Everyone else is running around naked on the beach, and I'm like in bonnet crawling down the sand. It's so funny.
Oh my God. What led, I just want to ask this before we wrap up. So what led her from New York to ending up in Hawaii? Because that's like total opposite. But opposites, like not even just the end of the country, but across the ocean too.
Yeah. My father. So when they got married, they moved out west. So they actually settled in Arizona, and that's where my brother was born. And then my father accepted a position in Hawaii. Was moving up in the ranks of things. And he's like, oh, this will be fun. We'll just go for a couple years. They put everything in storage, and 36 years later, they were still there. I actually had found out, I remember finding out that they still had all these things in storage. It's just so funny. Then I wound up like surprising them and having it all sent to Hawaii. And then of course, like a year later, they moved to California. But
oh my goodness.
But yeah, it was really fun to write that chapter too, just because, just revisiting my child and with a mother who was very vocal about missing New York and, oh, this is not like New York, whatever. And she was
not at all.
She was very resourceful in finding things for us to do. And so that was really fun to write about.
Did she get to go back at all while she's living in Hawaii all those years? Did she go back and revisit?
Yeah, that's the funny thing. She realized just how much she loved it. I mean, she actually went back more than I don't believe my father or brother actually had went back since they moved away, but she went back often. She realized, it's God's country, she used to call it. She's like, and I'm so grateful to have grown up there. I can't imagine another place. I'm just very grateful for, growing up in Hawaii.
Island girl. Well, lovely, wonderful. And so how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I make it really simple. It's just Caroline Nadine Helsing author, which is my Instagram, my Facebook, my YouTube. And then, I do have a website that links everything. So it's just carolinenadinehelsing.com. And I have a blog on there, and yeah.
And your book is available on Amazon and all the book carriers, or?
Yeah, currently it's on Amazon. I am planning to put it on the other platforms, and when I do, I'll let y'all know. But currently, it's on Kindle and paperback on Amazon.
So one last thing. So hearing everything about, how open your heart is and how much you've learned from your mother, all the lessons, the love that you had from her, what would you say, learning from her, it means to live from an awakened heart?
Well, to me, it's acceptance and seeing love in everything. Right? Love is at the center of everything. The more you give, the more it flows into and out of your life. It's seeing the world through childlike eyes, always learning and just not condemning others with the belief system that you know it all, just kind of being open. And that was one thing that my mother was very, she definitely had a strong sense of self, but she was friends with people from all walks of life. And again, she stressed to us just not by telling us, but more by showing us to be open to everything. So yeah, I would say acceptance and love.
Beautiful. Acceptance and love and openness and showing instead of just telling. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for joining today. And I can't wait to read the rest of your book. And everybody, I will put all the information in the show notes. In the show notes. So get out and buy this book yourself, and just, you'll feel your heart opening as you're reading this. It's such a beautiful read. And thank you so much for sharing her story, for bringing it to us. And I can't wait to read more. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Awakened Heart podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, head on over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, you can reach me at theawakenedheartpodcast.com.